Maria Rodriguez was not the kind of woman who drew attention to herself. She lived a simple life, content with what she had and never seeking recognition for anything. On this particular morning, her day began like any other. She woke up early, prepared breakfast for her family, and got dressed in her usual modest attire. A faded floral dress that had seen better days but still held sentimental value, paired with worn-out shoes that were comfortable enough for walking long distances. Her hair was tied back neatly into a bun, and though she wore no makeup or jewelry, there was something about Maria's demeanor that radiated quiet strength and dignity. That day, Maria decided to visit the local branch of Rodriguez Financial Group, one of the largest banks in the country. It wasn't because she needed anything extravagant. It was just a routine errand. She wanted to withdraw some cash for groceries and pay a small utility bill. The task seemed straightforward, but little did Maria know this trip would turn out to be anything but ordinary. As she approached the grand glass doors of the bank, Maria couldn't help but feel slightly out of place. The building stood tall and imposing, its sleek design reflecting wealth and power. Inside, marble floors gleamed under bright lights and the air smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive cologne. People moved briskly around her, dressed in sharp suits and designer outfits, their heels clicking against the floor as they carried briefcases filled with important documents. Compared to them, Maria felt almost invisible, a speck of simplicity, amidst all the luxury. She hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, clutching her old leather purse tightly in her hands. It wasn't that Maria disliked fancy places, she simply preferred staying away from the spotlight. Still, she reminded herself why she was here, to take care of practical matters, and pushed forward. The line at the counter wasn't too long, so she joined it patiently, waiting for her turn. When Maria finally reached the front desk, the teller barely glanced at her before sneering slightly. He looked down at her outdated checkbook, its edges frayed from years of use, and raised an eyebrow. "Do you even have enough funds to process this?" he asked dismissively, his tone dripping with condescension. Maria blinked, taken aback by the rudeness. She nodded calmly and replied, "Yes, I do. Could you please check my account?" But instead of helping her, the teller rolled his eyes exaggeratedly and muttered under his breath, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Why do people like this come here? They're wasting our time." His words stung, but Maria chose not to react. She knew better than to let someone else's negativity affect her peace of mind. Unfortunately, the situation only grew worse. Other customers waiting in line began whispering among themselves, casting judgmental glances at Maria. Some openly criticized her appearance, while others speculated about her financial status based solely on how she looked. One man even leaned over to his companion and said mockingly, "I bet she doesn't even belong here. Shouldn't she be using some cheaper service?" Each comment cut deeper than the last, but Maria kept her composure. She had faced prejudice before, though usually in less blatant forms. This time, however, it felt especially cruel because she hadn't done anything wrong. All she wanted was to complete a basic transaction. Yet suddenly, she found herself being treated like an intruder in a space where everyone else seemed to fit perfectly. It didn't occur to anyone, not the teller, nor the gossiping customers, that Maria might have more to her story than met the eye. No one noticed the subtle confidence in her posture, or the way she carried herself despite the mounting disrespect. And certainly, no one suspected that the unassuming woman standing quietly at the counter was married to Alejandro Rodriguez, the co-owner of the very bank they were sitting in. What made matters worse was that Maria could have easily revealed her identity right then and there. A single word from her would have silenced every critic and forced the staff to treat her with the utmost respect. But Maria wasn't interested in proving herself through titles or wealth. She believed in handling situations with grace and patience, hoping that kindness would prevail. Unfortunately, the employees at the bank weren't giving her much of a chance to demonstrate that philosophy. The tension escalated when the branch manager, Mr. Grayson, stepped in. A tall, stern-looking man with thinning hair and an authoritative presence. He surveyed the scene with obvious disapproval. Upon hearing complaints from both the teller and other patrons, he marched straight toward Maria, his expression cold and unwelcoming. "Ma'am," he began curtly, "we've received reports that your behavior is disrupting our operations. If you don't have sufficient funds or legitimate business here, I suggest you leave immediately." Maria stared at him, momentarily speechless. Behavior? Disrupting? She hadn't raised her voice once or caused any trouble, yet here she was, being accused of inconveniencing an entire bank full of people simply because of how she appeared. For a brief moment, anger bubbled within her, but she quickly pushed it aside. Instead, she tried to explain herself. "I'm sorry if I've caused any inconvenience," she said softly, maintaining her calm. "I assure you I have an account here, and I'm only trying to make a withdrawal. There's no need for hostility." Her words fell on deaf ears. Mr. Grayson, unwilling to listen further, snapped his fingers and summoned security guards. "Please escort this woman out," he instructed firmly, ignoring Maria's protests. "We won't tolerate disruptions in our establishment." And just like that, Maria was led outside, humiliated and hurt, but refusing to show it. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, she took a deep breath, letting the cool breeze soothe her emotions. She understood now that the problem wasn't with her. It was with the attitudes of those who judged others without knowing their stories. Still, she couldn't shake off the disappointment lingering in her heart. What Maria didn't realize, however, was that fate had something extraordinary in store. Within minutes, a black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb, catching the attention of passers-by. Out stepped Alejandro Rodriguez, impeccably dressed and exuding authority. Little did anyone know his arrival would change everything, for Maria, for the bank, and for everyone involved. The moment Maria stepped outside the bank, she felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her: humiliation, frustration, and sadness. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was treated like an unwelcome intruder simply because of how she looked. Her faded floral dress, worn-out shoes, and lack of flashy accessories had somehow become markers of judgment in the eyes of the staff and customers. It wasn't fair, but Maria knew life rarely was. She stood on the sidewalk for a few moments, trying to collect herself. The cool breeze brushed against her face, offering some comfort as she took slow, steady breaths. Maria reminded herself that she didn't need validation from people who couldn't see beyond appearances. Still, it was hard not to feel hurt by their harsh words and dismissive attitudes. As she glanced back at the towering glass doors of the bank, Maria's mind replayed the scene inside. The sneering teller, the whispering customers, and finally, the cold, unyielding stare of Mr. Grayson. All of it replayed in her head like a broken record. What made it worse was that they hadn't even given her a chance. They assumed she didn't belong there without bothering to check her account or listen to her explanation. Maria sighed deeply. She could have ended the whole ordeal right then and there by revealing her identity. After all, her husband, Alejandro Rodriguez, was one of the wealthiest men in the country and co-owner of the very bank chain she had just been thrown out of. But Maria wasn't the kind of person to rely on titles or wealth to prove her worth. She believed in handling situations with dignity and grace, hoping that kindness would win over prejudice. Unfortunately, the employees at the bank weren't giving her much of a chance to demonstrate that philosophy. What Maria didn't realize was that her visit to the bank wasn't entirely random. She had come here intentionally, not just to withdraw money, but also to observe how the staff treated everyday customers. Alejandro had mentioned recently that this particular branch had received complaints about poor customer service and disrespectful behavior. Maria, always eager to help her husband improve his business, decided to investigate for herself. She wanted to experience firsthand what ordinary people went through when dealing with the bank's employees. But she hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly. Being thrown out of the bank was far worse than anything she had anticipated. As she walked away from the building, Maria wondered if she should call Alejandro and tell him what had happened. Part of her hesitated. She didn't want to make a big deal out of it or cause trouble for anyone. Yet another part of her knew that this incident needed to be addressed. If this was how the staff treated someone like her, a simple woman dressed plainly, how did they treat others who were less fortunate? The thought troubled her deeply. Unbeknownst to Maria, fate had other plans. Just as she turned the corner, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb outside the bank. Out stepped Alejandro Rodriguez, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blue suit that fit him perfectly. His polished leather shoes clicked against the pavement as he strode toward the entrance with purpose. Accompanying him was his assistant, carrying a leather briefcase filled with documents related to the day's agenda. Alejandro's arrival immediately drew attention. Employees scrambled to greet him, bowing slightly and addressing him formally. "Good morning, Mr. Rodriguez," one of them said nervously while another rushed to open the door for him. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The once busy lobby fell into a hushed silence as everyone turned to watch the CEO walk in. Alejandro's sharp eyes scanned the room, taking note of the nervous energy among the staff. Something felt off, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He greeted the employees politely but kept his tone professional, making it clear that this was a serious visit. "I'm here to review operations," he announced, his voice firm yet calm. "Let's start with recent customer feedback reports." The manager, Mr. Grayson, hurried forward, his face flushed with anxiety. He had heard rumors that Alejandro might drop by unexpectedly, but he hadn't expected it to happen today. Now, standing face to face with the man himself, Mr. Grayson felt a wave of panic wash over him. Had word already reached Alejandro about the earlier incident? Surely not. It had only happened minutes ago. Still, Mr. Grayson couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. "Mr. Rodriguez," Mr. Grayson began, forcing a smile onto his face. "Welcome to our branch. We're honored to have you here. Is there anything specific you'd like to discuss?" Alejandro nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes, actually. I've been reviewing performance metrics for this location, and I noticed some concerning trends regarding customer satisfaction. Care to explain?" "Mr." Grayson swallowed hard, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He stammered through an explanation, mentioning vague issues like technical difficulties and staff shortages. But Alejandro wasn't satisfied. He pressed further, asking pointed questions that left Mr. Grayson squirming under the pressure. Just as the conversation seemed to be reaching its peak tension, one of the junior employees hesitantly spoke up. "Sir," she said softly, glancing nervously at Mr. Grayson before continuing. There was an incident earlier today involving a customer. She caused some disruption and we had to ask her to leave." Alejandro raised an eyebrow. His curiosity piqued. "A disruption?" he repeated, his tone calm but laced with authority. "Explain." Mr. Grayson jumped in quickly, eager to control the narrative. "It was nothing major, sir," he assured Alejandro. "Just a misunderstanding. The woman appeared to be, well, let's say not typical of our clientele. She didn't seem to understand proper banking procedures and unfortunately she became difficult to manage. For the sake of efficiency, we escorted her out." Alejandro listened intently, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. There was something about Mr. Grayson's explanation that didn't sit right with him. Before he could respond, however, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Pulling it out, he saw a text message from Maria. "Are you still coming to the branch today?" A flicker of realization crossed Alejandro's face. Without another word, he dialed Maria's number and held the phone to his ear. After a brief exchange, he hung up and turned to Mr. Grayson, his expression darkening. "Bring her back in," Alejandro commanded, his voice low, but authoritative. "Now!" Confusion rippled through the room. "Bring who back, sir?" Mr. Grayson asked cautiously, his voice trembling. Alejandro's piercing gaze locked onto the manager. "My wife," he said sharply. "You just described her." The color drained from Mr. Grayson's face as the weight of his mistake hit him like a ton of bricks. Whispers erupted among the staff, disbelief mingling with fear. No one had realized that the simple woman they had thrown out moments ago was married to the man now standing before them, their boss, their CEO, the owner of the entire bank chain. Within seconds, 2 security guards were dispatched to fetch Maria. When she re-entered the bank, holding Alejandro's hand firmly in hers, the room fell silent. Every eye was on them, wide with shock and shame. Alejandro wasted no time in addressing the crowd. "This is my wife," he declared, his voice cutting through the tense air like a knife. "And I believe you owe her an apology." The scene that followed was unforgettable. Mr. Grayson stammered through an awkward apology, his face red with embarrassment. Other employees looked down at their feet, too ashamed to meet Maria's gaze. Meanwhile, Maria stood tall, her quiet strength shining brighter than ever. Though she had been humiliated earlier, she chose not to gloat or seek revenge. Instead, she extended forgiveness, knowing that true power lies in compassion rather than retaliation. As Alejandro continued to address the staff, laying out consequences for their actions and demanding accountability, Maria reflected on the day's events. She hadn't intended for things to unfold this way, but perhaps it was for the best. Sometimes, lessons are learned the hard way, and, in this case, the lesson was clear. Never judge a book by its cover. The air in the bank was thick with tension as Maria walked back inside, holding Alejandro's hand. The contrast between her humble appearance and his commanding presence couldn't have been starker. While Maria's faded floral dress and worn-out shoes spoke of simplicity, Alejandro's tailored navy blue suit radiated authority and power. Every step he took seemed to echo through the room, silencing whispers and freezing movements. Employees who had moments ago dismissed Maria as an unwelcome nuisance now stood frozen, their faces pale with shock and disbelief. Alejandro didn't waste time beating around the bush. His sharp eyes locked onto Mr. Grayson, the branch manager, whose earlier confidence had evaporated completely. "Explain yourself," Alejandro said, his tone calm but laced with steel. Each word carried weight, leaving no room for excuses or evasions. Mr. Grayson, visibly sweating, stumbled over his words. "Sir, I assure you it was all a misunderstanding. The customer, your wife, she appeared to be disruptive, and we thought—" "You thought?" Alejandro interrupted, raising an eyebrow. His voice remained steady, but there was an edge to it that made everyone in the room flinch. "You judged her based on appearances without even verifying her identity or account status, is that correct?" Mr. Grayson opened his mouth to respond but found himself unable to form coherent sentences. Instead, he glanced helplessly at the other employees, hoping someone would come to his rescue. But no one dared speak up. The junior teller who had initially sneered at Maria stared at the floor, too ashamed to meet anyone's gaze. Even the security guards who had escorted Maria out shuffled uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact altogether. Maria, meanwhile, remained silent. She stood beside Alejandro, her expression calm and composed, despite the whirlwind of emotions she must have been feeling. Her quiet dignity only added to the gravity of the moment. It was clear to everyone present that this wasn't just about a single incident. It was about respect, fairness, and how people are treated based on assumptions rather than facts. Alejandro turned to face the staff, his piercing gaze sweeping across the room. "Let me make something very clear," he began, his voice firm yet measured. "This bank exists to serve all customers, regardless of their background, appearance, or financial standing. No one, not a teller, not a manager, and certainly not security personnel, has the right to mistreat anyone who walks through those doors." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "What happened here today is unacceptable. Not only did you insult a valued customer, but you also disrespected my wife. Do you understand the seriousness of your actions?" The silence in the room was deafening. Employees exchanged nervous glances, some nodding hesitantly while others looked like they wished they could disappear. Mr. Grayson, desperate to salvage whatever scraps of dignity he had left, attempted another apology. "Mr. Rodriguez, please accept our sincerest apologies. We never intended to cause any harm. If we had known—" "If you had known what?" Alejandro cut him off sharply. "If you had known she was my wife, would you have treated her differently? Would you have shown her the courtesy and professionalism every customer deserves?" Mr. Grayson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. There was no good answer to that question, and he knew it. His silence spoke volumes, confirming Alejandro's suspicions. This wasn't just about Maria. It was about a deeper issue within the branch, a culture of prejudice and elitism that needed to be addressed immediately. Alejandro stepped closer to the group of employees, his towering figure casting a shadow over them. "From this moment forward," he declared, "I will personally oversee reforms in this branch. My wife, Maria, will play a key role in implementing these changes. She understands better than anyone the importance of treating people with kindness and respect." At this announcement, Maria finally spoke up. Her voice was soft, but carried immense authority. "I'm not here to punish anyone," she said, gently addressing the staff. "But I do want you to think about how your actions affect others. When someone walks into this bank, they may be going through challenges you can't see. They might feel vulnerable or uncertain. Your job is to make them feel welcome and valued, not judged or belittled." Her words struck a chord with many of the employees. Some nodded slowly, their expressions shifting from shame to understanding. Others wiped away tears, realizing the impact of their behavior. For the first time, they saw the human side of their work, the responsibility they held to treat every individual with care and empathy. Alejandro then turned his attention back to Mr. Grayson. "As for you," he said coldly, "your conduct today has demonstrated a lack of leadership and integrity. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties as branch manager. You will be reassigned to a remote location where your actions won't tarnish the reputation of this institution." The room gasped collectively. Mr. Grayson's knees nearly buckled under the weight of the news. He tried to protest, stammering about second chances and learning from mistakes, but Alejandro held up a hand to silence him. "Consider this an opportunity to reflect on your values and priorities," he said firmly. "We expect better from our leaders." With that, Alejandro signaled for two senior executives accompanying him to escort Mr. Grayson out of the building. As the disgraced manager left, shoulders slumped and head bowed low, a collective sigh of relief filled the room. The oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly, replaced by a sense of accountability and hope for change. After ensuring Mr. Grayson's departure, Alejandro addressed the remaining staff once more. "Change starts today," he emphasized. "Each of you has a choice. Either embrace this opportunity to grow and improve or continue down the path of complacency and bias. I trust you'll choose wisely." Maria placed a reassuring hand on Alejandro's arm, signaling that it was time to wrap up the discussion. Together, they announced that a series of training sessions would be conducted to address issues of discrimination, bias, and customer service. These sessions wouldn't just focus on rules and policies. They would delve into the heart of the matter, encouraging employees to connect with customers on a human level. As the meeting concluded, Alejandro and Maria left the bank, their presence having left an indelible mark on everyone inside. The staff lingered behind, murmuring among themselves about what had transpired. Some expressed guilt and regret, vowing to do better in the future. Others marveled at Maria's grace under pressure, wondering how she managed to remain so poised, despite everything she'd endured. Outside, Maria took a deep breath, feeling both drained and empowered. She glanced at Alejandro, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for standing up for me," she said softly. "But more importantly, thank you for standing up for what's right." Alejandro smiled warmly, squeezing her hand. "It's not just about us, Maria. It's about setting an example. For them, for the company, and for everyone who believes in fairness and respect." Little did they know, their actions that day would spark a ripple effect far beyond the walls of that single branch. News of the incident spread quickly, inspiring discussions about equality and compassion across the entire banking network. And though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, Maria and Alejandro were determined to lead the way, one step at a time. For Maria, the experience reinforced her belief in the power of humility and forgiveness. For Alejandro, it reaffirmed his commitment to using his influence for good. Together, they proved that true strength lies not in wealth or titles, but in the ability to uplift others and create meaningful change. The days following the dramatic events at the bank were a whirlwind of activity and reflection. News of what had transpired spread like wildfire, not just within the branch but across the entire Rodriguez Financial Group network. Employees from other locations began sharing stories, some similar, others worse, about how customers had been mistreated due to bias or elitism. It became painfully clear that the issues plaguing this particular branch weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a much larger problem embedded in the company's culture. Alejandro wasted no time addressing the situation head-on. True to his word, he launched a comprehensive investigation into customer service practices across all branches. Teams of auditors were dispatched to evaluate interactions between staff and clients, reviewing everything from tone of voice to body language. Meanwhile, Maria took charge of designing a new training program aimed at fostering empathy and inclusivity among employees. She believed that meaningful change couldn't be achieved through rules alone. It required a shift in mindset. Maria spent hours crafting the curriculum, drawing on her own experiences as well as insights gathered from focus groups with diverse customers. The program wasn't just about teaching employees how to follow protocols. It was about helping them understand the impact of their actions on real people. She included role-playing exercises where participants had to imagine themselves in someone else's shoes. A single mother struggling to pay bills, an elderly man confused by digital banking systems, or even a wealthy businessman feeling disrespected because of a minor oversight. These scenarios forced employees to confront their biases and recognize the humanity behind every transaction. Word of Maria's involvement quickly reached the media, sparking widespread interest. Journalists clamored to interview her, eager to learn more about the simple woman who had exposed deep-rooted prejudices in one of the country's largest financial institutions. But Maria declined most requests, preferring to stay out of the spotlight. Instead, she focused her energy on mentoring the staff at the branch where the incident had occurred, determined to turn it into a model of excellence. Her approach was gentle yet firm. She didn't lecture or scold employees for their past mistakes. Instead, she encouraged open dialogue, creating a safe space for them to share their thoughts and fears. Many admitted that they hadn't realized how harmful their behavior could be, while others confessed feeling pressured to maintain a certain image of professionalism that inadvertently alienated customers. Maria listened patiently, offering guidance without judgment. "It's okay to make mistakes," she told them during one session. "What matters is that we learn from them and do better moving forward. Every person who walks into this bank deserves to feel valued, no matter who they are or what they look like." Her words resonated deeply with the staff, many of whom began to see their jobs in a new light. They started paying closer attention to their interactions with customers, striving to go above and beyond to ensure everyone felt welcome. Some even went out of their way to assist elderly clients or explain complex procedures in simpler terms. Slowly but surely, the atmosphere in the branch transformed from cold and impersonal to warm and inviting. Meanwhile, Alejandro implemented sweeping policy changes to reinforce these cultural shifts. He introduced anonymous feedback systems, allowing customers to rate their experiences without fear of retaliation. Any complaints received were investigated thoroughly, and repeat offenders faced disciplinary action. Additionally, he established a hotline for employees to report instances of discrimination or unfair treatment, ensuring accountability at every level. But perhaps the most impactful decision Alejandro made was to publicly acknowledge the bank's shortcomings. In a press conference attended by reporters, analysts, and members of the public, he stood alongside Maria and delivered a heartfelt apology. "We failed our customers," he admitted, his voice steady but filled words with regret. "And for that, I take full responsibility. Moving forward, we are committed to rebuilding trust and proving that Rodriguez Financial Group stands for fairness, respect, and equality." Maria added her perspective, speaking directly to those who might have been hurt by the bank's previous practices. "If you ever felt unwelcome or disrespected in one of our branches, please know that your feelings matter," she said softly. "We're working hard to ensure that no one else has to endure what I did. This is just the beginning of our journey toward change." The response from the public was overwhelmingly positive. Social media platforms lit up with messages of support, praising Alejandro and Maria for their transparency and willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Customers shared heartwarming stories of how the improved service had touched their lives, while advocacy groups hailed the couple as champions of corporate reform. Of course, not everyone was pleased. A small faction of longtime employees grumbled about the changes, claiming they made the workplace too soft or politically correct. Some even threatened to quit, unwilling to adapt to the new standards. But Alejandro remained steadfast, reminding everyone that progress often comes with resistance. Those who couldn't align with the company's values were free to leave, and several did, making way for fresh talent eager to embrace the evolving culture. As weeks turned into months, the transformation became undeniable. The once troubled branch earned accolades for its exceptional customer service, setting records for client satisfaction scores. Other branches followed suit, adopting Maria's training program and implementing Alejandro's policies. Together, they created an environment where kindness and professionalism went hand in hand, a place where people truly felt seen and heard. For Maria, the experience reinforced her belief in the power of humility and forgiveness. She never sought recognition or praise. Her only goal was to inspire change. And though the process had been challenging at times, seeing the tangible results made every moment worth it. Employees thanked her for opening their eyes, while customers expressed gratitude for the renewed sense of dignity they experienced when visiting the bank. Alejandro, too, found himself profoundly impacted by the ordeal. As a CEO, he had always prioritized efficiency and profitability, but now he understood that true success lay in empowering others and promoting social responsibility. He credited Maria for guiding him toward this realization, often referring to her as his greatest teacher and partner. Together, the couple continued to lead by example, using their wealth and influence to champion causes close to their hearts. From supporting local charities to advocating for fair labor practices, they proved that leadership isn't just about titles or profits. It's about leaving the world better than you found it. And as for the bank, it became more than just a financial institution. It became a symbol of hope, proving that even the most rigid systems can evolve when driven by compassion and integrity. Through Maria and Alejandro's efforts, countless lives were touched, and a legacy of kindness was born, one that would endure for generations to come. The weeks that followed the dramatic overhaul at Rodriguez Financial Group were transformative not just for the employees, but also for the customers who interacted with the bank. The changes implemented by Maria and Alejandro began to take root, creating ripples of positivity that extended far beyond the walls of the once troubled branch. What started as a single incident of prejudice had evolved into a movement, a mission to redefine how businesses treat people, regardless of their background or appearance. Maria's training program became the cornerstone of this transformation. It wasn't just another corporate seminar filled with jargon and checklists. It was deeply personal, designed to touch hearts and challenge minds. Employees weren't simply told what to do, they were shown why it mattered. Through storytelling, role-playing, and reflective discussions, Maria helped them understand the human side of banking. She reminded them that behind every account number was a person with dreams, struggles, and emotions. One of the most impactful sessions involved sharing real-life stories from customers. For example, an elderly woman recounted how she had been mocked for forgetting her PIN multiple times during a transaction. Another customer described feeling humiliated when a teller scoffed at her modest withdrawal amount, assuming she couldn't afford better services. These narratives hit home for many employees, forcing them to confront the consequences of their actions or inactions. Some broke down in tears, overwhelmed by guilt, while others vowed to never let such incidents happen again. Maria encouraged these emotional responses, believing they were essential for genuine growth. Change begins with empathy, she often said. When you truly see someone, not just their clothes or their balance, you'll treat them differently. Kindness isn't optional, it's non-negotiable. As the staff embraced this philosophy, the atmosphere inside the branches shifted dramatically. Employees greeted customers with warm smiles instead of judgmental stares. They took extra time to explain procedures patiently, especially to those unfamiliar with modern banking systems. Even small gestures like offering water to waiting clients or remembering their names made a world of difference. Customers noticed and appreciated the effort, leaving glowing reviews online and recommending the bank to friends and family. Alejandro complimented Maria's soft approach with firm accountability measures. He introduced performance metrics, tied directly to customer satisfaction ratings, ensuring that kindness wasn't just encouraged but rewarded. Staff members who excelled in providing exceptional service received bonuses, public recognition, and opportunities for career advancement. Conversely, those who failed to meet expectations faced consequences ranging from additional training to termination. This dual strategy, rewarding good behavior while penalizing bad, ensured that everyone understood the importance of adhering to the new standards. But Alejandro didn't stop there. Recognizing that systemic issues often required structural solutions, he restructured the management hierarchy within the company. Branch managers were no longer judged solely on financial targets. Their evaluations now included criteria related to team morale, customer feedback, and ethical conduct. Promotions were contingent upon demonstrating leadership qualities rooted in compassion and fairness. These changes sent a clear message. Success wasn't measured by profit margins alone. It was defined by the positive impact one could create. Meanwhile, Maria continued to play an active role in mentoring employees, particularly those struggling to adapt to the new culture. One such individual was Clara, a junior teller who had initially dismissed Maria during the infamous incident. Clara had been racked with guilt ever since realizing the simple woman she had sneered at was actually the CEO's wife. At first, she avoided eye contact with Maria, too ashamed to face her. But Maria, sensing Clara's remorse, reached out personally. "Clara," Maria said gently during one of their meetings, "I know you're carrying a lot of regret right now, but I want you to know something. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you choose to do next." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes as she listened. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Rodriguez. I don't even know why I acted like that. I was rude and disrespectful, and I hate myself for it." Maria placed a comforting hand on Clara's shoulder. "You can't change the past, but you can shape your future. Use this experience to grow, to become someone who lifts others up instead of tearing them down. That's all any of us can do." Inspired by Maria's words, Clara threw herself into her work with renewed determination. She became one of the most compassionate and diligent employees at the branch, going above and beyond to assist customers. Her turnaround earned her not only praise from supervisors but also forgiveness from Maria, who proudly promoted her to a senior position after 6 months. Stories like Clara's became common across the network. Employees who had once resisted change found themselves embracing it wholeheartedly, motivated by both internal growth and external incentives. The transformation wasn't instantaneous. It took time, effort, and patience, but the results spoke for themselves. Customer complaints plummeted while satisfaction scores soared. Revenue increased as more individuals chose to bank with Rodriguez Financial Group, drawn by its reputation for excellence and inclusivity. Outside the company, the couple's efforts garnered widespread acclaim. Media outlets hailed Maria and Alejandro as trailblazers in corporate reform, highlighting their unique partnership as a model for blending business acumen with social responsibility. Maria, though still reluctant to seek the spotlight, agreed to participate in select interviews to amplify their message. In one television appearance, she shared a powerful insight. "True wealth isn't measured by money, it's measured by the lives you touch and the difference you make." Her words resonated deeply with viewers, sparking conversations about the role businesses play in shaping society. Schools invited Maria to speak at career days, inspiring young students to pursue careers driven by purpose rather than profit. Nonprofit organizations sought Alejandro's advice on implementing similar reforms in their own sectors. Together, the couple became symbols of hope and progress, proving that even the largest institutions could evolve when guided by integrity and empathy. However, The road to redemption wasn't without challenges. A handful of disgruntled former employees launched smear campaigns against the company, accusing Alejandro and Maria of being overly idealistic or impractical. Critics argued that prioritizing kindness over efficiency would ultimately harm the bottom line. But Alejandro dismissed these claims, pointing to the bank's record-breaking profits as evidence that compassion and commerce could coexist harmoniously. "We've proven that treating people well doesn't cost us. It benefits us," he stated, confidently during a press conference. "Happy employees lead to happy customers, which leads to sustainable growth. It's not rocket science, it's common sense." By the end of the year, Rodriguez Financial Group had undergone a complete metamorphosis. Once criticized for arrogance and elitism, it was now celebrated as a beacon of inclusivity and innovation. Awards poured in, recognizing the company's commitment to social responsibility and customer satisfaction. Yet despite the accolades, Maria and Alejandro remained grounded, focusing on the bigger picture, using their influence to inspire lasting change. For Maria, the journey reinforced her belief in the power of humility and grace. She never sought credit for her contributions, preferring to stay behind the scenes and let the results speak for themselves. But those who worked closely with her knew better. They saw firsthand how her quiet strength and unwavering compassion had transformed an entire organization. As for Alejandro, he emerged from the experience with a renewed sense of purpose. No longer content to measure success purely in terms of dollars and cents. He dedicated himself to building a legacy rooted in kindness and equality. He often joked that marrying Maria had been the best business decision of his life, not because of her connections or wealth, but because of the values she brought to the table. Together, the couple proved that true leadership isn't about wielding power, it's about empowering others. Their partnership served as a testament to the idea that when two people unite under a shared vision, they can achieve extraordinary things. And through their efforts, countless lives were touched, paving the way for a brighter, more inclusive future. The ripple effects of Maria and Alejandro's efforts extended far beyond the walls of Rodriguez Financial Group, touching lives in ways neither of them could have anticipated. What had started as a single incident of prejudice transformed into a movement that inspired change not just within their own company, but across industries. Their story became a beacon of hope, proving that even the most entrenched systems could evolve when guided by empathy, humility, and integrity. As months turned into years, the reforms implemented at Rodriguez Financial Group continued to yield remarkable results. The once troubled branch where Maria had been mistreated became one of the highest performing locations in the network, not because of increased profits, though those certainly followed, but because of its unparalleled customer satisfaction ratings. People traveled from neighboring towns just to visit this particular branch, drawn by its reputation for warmth and inclusivity. Employees took immense pride in their work, knowing they were part of something bigger than themselves, a culture built on respect and kindness. Maria's training program, initially designed for internal use, gained widespread recognition and was eventually adopted by other companies eager to replicate the success of Rodriguez Financial Group. Banks, retail chains, and even tech startups reached out to Maria, asking her to adapt her curriculum for their unique needs. She approached these requests with characteristic humility, often saying, "I'm no expert. I'm just someone who believes in treating people right." Despite her modesty, her methods worked wonders, earning her invitations to speak at conferences and seminars around the world. One such event brought Maria face-to-face with a young entrepreneur named Sophia, who ran a small business, struggling to attract loyal customers. After hearing Maria share her story, Sophia approached her during a break, tears streaming down her face. "Your words touched me so deeply," Sophia confessed. "I want my company to reflect the same values you've instilled in yours. Can you help me?" Moved by Sophia's sincerity, Maria agreed to mentor her, offering guidance on how to create a workplace culture centered around compassion and fairness. Over time, Sophia's business flourished, not because she lowered prices or launched flashy marketing campaigns, but because she made every customer feel valued and respected. Inspired by Maria's example, Sophia went on to mentor others, creating a chain reaction of positive change. Alejandro, too, found himself inundated with requests for advice. Business leaders sought his counsel on balancing profitability with social responsibility, while advocacy groups praised him for setting a new standard in corporate ethics. He used these opportunities to amplify Maria's message, emphasizing that true leadership isn't about accumulating wealth or power, it's about uplifting others. Together, he and Maria co-authored a book titled Beyond Transactions, Building Businesses That Matter, which quickly became a bestseller. Its core premise was simple yet profound. Businesses exist to serve humanity, not the other way around. Despite their growing fame, Maria and Alejandro remained deeply connected to their roots. They continued to live modestly, choosing comfort over extravagance and prioritizing family over material possessions. Their children grew up surrounded by lessons of humility and service, learning firsthand the importance of using privilege to make a difference. On weekends, the couple volunteered at local shelters and community centers, quietly contributing to causes close to their hearts without seeking attention or praise. Their influence also extended into policy-making circles. Governments and regulatory bodies began consulting Alejandro on crafting legislation aimed at promoting fair labor practices and protecting vulnerable consumers. Maria, meanwhile, collaborated with nonprofits to address issues like financial literacy among low-income families and access to banking services for marginalized communities. Together, they lobbied for systemic changes that would ensure no one was ever treated unfairly due to their socioeconomic status. Perhaps the most heartwarming aspect of their journey was the lasting impact they had on individuals. Former employees who had once dismissed Maria as an ordinary woman now credited her with changing their perspectives and their lives. Clara, the junior teller who had mocked Maria during the infamous incident, rose through the ranks to become one of the company's top executives. In interviews, she often spoke about how Maria's forgiveness and mentorship had taught her the value of second chances. "She didn't just save my career," Clara said. "She saved my soul." Customers, too, shared countless stories of how the bank's transformation had brightened their days, or even altered their circumstances. An elderly man recalled how a teller patiently helped him set up online banking despite his initial resistance to technology, enabling him to stay connected with his grandchildren. A single mother tearfully recounted how a loan officer worked tirelessly to secure funding for her small business, giving her the opportunity to provide for her children. These anecdotes served as testaments to the power of human connection, reminding everyone involved why they did what they did. Yet for all the accolades and achievements, Maria and Alejandro never lost sight of their original mission: to remind the world that appearances are deceiving and that everyone deserves dignity and respect. They frequently revisited the branch where it all began, checking in with employees and customers alike to ensure the spirit of change endured. During one such visit, Maria noticed a young girl sitting quietly in the corner while her mother filled out paperwork. Curious, Maria approached them and struck up a conversation. "Hi there," Maria said warmly, kneeling to meet the girls, eye level. "What's your name?" The girl shyly replied, "Emily." "Well, Emily," Maria continued with a smile, "do you know why we're here today?" Emily shook her head, prompting Maria to explain. "We're here to help people, just like superheroes do, but instead of capes, we wear smiles and listen carefully. Would you like to be a helper someday?" Emily nodded enthusiastically, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Watching the scene unfold, Alejandro felt a surge of pride. This was the legacy they hoped to leave behind. A future generation committed to making the world a kinder, more inclusive place. Years later, as Maria and Alejandro reflected on their journey together, they realized that their greatest achievement wasn't the awards, the profits, or even the reforms. It was the countless lives they had touched along the way. Through their actions, they had shown that true strength lies not in titles or wealth, but in the ability to inspire others to be better versions of themselves. And so, their story served as a timeless reminder. Kindness is contagious, and change begins with a single act of courage. Whether it's standing up against injustice, forgiving those who wrong us, or simply treating others with compassion, each choice we make has the power to shape the world. For Maria and Alejandro, that belief was more than enough. It was everything.